All right, so if you guys don't know me, my name is Stan Lopez. I'm a commercial agent here in Las Vegas. I've been licensed now for a year and focusing on the licensing side of multifamily and underwriting, these type of deals. So I've been in here for about 15 years, and I know Josh through Carlos, who's usually the co-host, but he's out traveling, right?
Yeah, he had some stuff he had to go do. I think he's out for the weekend, but he'll be popping in throughout the weekend.
Yeah. So if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. You guys could be anywhere else, but you guys are here learning about multifamily and how to do underwriting on basics. So I just want to say disclosure, this is just educational purposes. This is just a basic underwriting class, and everything that you learn here is, I'm still learning as well. So if you catch anything that I make a mistake on that you notice, please let me know. Like it happened last week. So, I'm not always perfect and will never be, but I try to teach you guys based on what I've learned so far on the underwriting side. Feel free to ask me questions. I don't usually check the chat, but Josh will probably be checking it for me as a co-host today. So if there is any questions, feel free to ask. No question is a stupid question. So if you never ask, you won't ever know. All right. So if you guys want, please turn on your cameras so I can see all the pretty faces on the names instead of your guys' blank screens. Awesome. Cool. So who here, by a show of hands, is brand new to multifamily? Got 3. Charles, you're not brand new. You've been here. You're a big experience. Marlon's brand new.
No, not really.
Okay. Sarah's brand new. I think Bardon, you've been here before. Hi, Laura. First time you joining us. Okay, we got more people joining in.
Hi, Stan. Sorry, I can't go on video. I
Nah, it's all
might have
good.
to leave in a second.
It's all good. Thanks for joining us. All right,
Thank you.
cool. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to make this very, very easy. I'm just going to start off with a few things just to keep in mind to help you guys understand the basics of underwriting. So there's a few things on here that are kind of that are pretty important when it comes to evaluating a property. We're going to go over how to do that based on formula, and then also the 4 main things that you're going to have to ask a broker or the seller when you guys are asking for financials, right? So the 4 main things that you're going to ask for, I'm just going to start this off, is the OM, which is the offering memorandum. You guys can see my screen, right? Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Number 2, you're going to ask for T12, which is basically your trailing 12 months of financials. Number 3 is your P&L statements, which is your profits and losses, okay? And number 4 is rent rolls. Rent rolls are basically all the tenants that's in place. It'll tell you the background of, or when their months are ending, or when their leases are ending, who's month to month, if they're on a Section 8 or any type of special programs that they're on. Any delinquencies, they typically would include that if they're, if they have a bookkeeper or pretty organized. Sometimes you'll realize that when you ask for some of these things, they don't get included because they're like a little mom and pops type of investment property, and they're not institutional. So you won't get a lot of these, but most of the time when you talk to a broker or a seller, these are 4 main things you want to ask for, okay? Offering memorandum is just basically a flyer. I'll show you guys what it looks like. basically a flyer of what the property's details are. It includes, the analysis of the surrounding areas, the overview of the property, what's the purchase price, and any things that they want to give you, kind of like a teaser. Sometimes they give you the whole entire overview of the property. So that's what's included basically in the offering memorandum. You're going to hear that. You're going to hear a lot of these lingos that you're going to hear in multifamily that's not used obviously in other asset classes. T12, like I said, it's just a trailing 12 months of the last, from when it was, from the current date, year to date, right? So if this is August, you're going to get basically July of 2022 all the way up 12 months prior. And then profit and loss statements are basically what it is. Profit and loss is where your income and expenses are for the property, and basically all the operating CapEx that's included. So those are the four main things. Okay.
Do you need to have the property on the contract to ask for that first?
Good question. No, you don't. You don't necessarily have to, but if we're talking about like bigger properties that are contracted by, let's say, a broker, more than likely they're going to ask you for what's called proof of funds, right? Just to qualify you, to make sure that you're serious. A lot of the times, the commercial agents don't like to waste their time on people that just are asking questions. So they try to disqualify you based on your credentials. So they're going to ask you for either, your buyer profile or your proof of funds, just to show that you have credibility. Okay. But they typically don't come with it all the time. So sometimes wholesalers can get it for you if they make a good relationship, or if they're direct to the seller, they can get that for you as well. So yeah. All right. If you guys are taking notes, these are the three main formulas that are very important when it comes to multifamily. All right, the first one is NOI. NOI is your net operating income. Okay. Your net operating income is basically what you're making net after you minus expenses on the property. This is what you're actually taking home for that. And this slash is divided by your cap rate, your capitalization rate, basically what your return of investment is on the property. And if you take your NOI, you divide that by your cap rate, you'll get your purchase price. Okay. So these are like quick hacks to do, basically back of the napkin type of understanding of what the purchase, like the value of a property is. Okay. So if you look at here on the top left, for example, column A, row 2, this is the NOI, right? If you take the property's value, divide that by, for the property value right here, take A2, divide that by the market cap rate, which is that 7.5. This is what your purchase price of the value of the property is considered at. Okay, number 2 is, if you want to get your NOI, you take your purchase price and you multiply that by the cap rate. That's how you get your NOI. So take this, for example, and just show it right here. If you take your purchase price, we're going to work backwards now, and you multiply that by the cap rate, you get your NOI right here. See how exactly the same numbers, $26,852.90. And we'll do this, for example, for the NOI, divide that by the cap rate, and you get the property's value, which is the purchase price. And the last one is your NOI, which is right here, and divide that by the purchase price, and you get your cap rate. Okay. So those are the three main formulas that if you really want to do back of the napkin type of calculation on what the value of a property is, you can use that. This applies for multifamily, applies for shopping centers, it applies for a hotel, pretty much almost every asset class in commercial. This is how they get their figures from. All right. I'm gonna get into these later on, but let's just go into the inputs right here. So this property, I did an underwriting for. It was sent to us by actually it was sent to us by Carlos, one of our creative finance partners, and he's amazing at what he does. So I partnered with him, and we got a lead from another wholesaler. And this property is based out of Houston, Texas. It's a 14 unit. It's 7 duplexes in here. They consist of 12 studios and 12 studio units and 2 units that are 1 bed, 1 bath. Okay. So if we go down here, I just kind of make this as more of a reference for the property information. This is just for me to see, what the overview of the property is. And I just basically plug these in. Right, there's 14 units. According to the OM, there is 8 of them that are physically occupied, 6 of them are vacant, right? And so the occupancy rate here is really low, right? They're at a 57%. So you already, just from looking at this, you already can tell that this property is undervalued just based on the 10C. Okay. I don't remember what the year is built, so I didn't plug it in. This has a classification of a type C. You're going to hear what different classifications are, and there are 3 main, well, there's 4, but you don't typically hear of a class D unless it's more of like a war zone. So you'll hear class A, class B, class C, and they're basically classified based on, there's a few different factors, which is location, the type of materials that they're using, the finishes, the price point, the crime in the area. So there's multiple different, but these are the few that, just right off the top of my head that I can let you guys know of. So this is the street address based on what city is in Houston. It's in Harris County. This is a 1-story property. As far as the parking spots, I believe that it was 12, and then the ratio is at 0.86. So it's under that 1-to-1 ratio for parking. And then this is a value add property. So you'll hear that term value add, and you'll also hear stabilized. The difference is when you're doing a value add property, you're basically adding amenities or different types of, you're increasing rents, you're lowering your expense ratio. Those are ways to add value to a property. So once you're finished with adding a value to the property, then that's what's considered stabilized, right? You're stabilizing the property so that you're generating an income over time and you're not doing anything else more to it. So that's what's the terminology that you're going to hear from when you're having conversations with brokers or wholesalers or anybody that's in the commercial space. All right, so based on the price per square feet, it's at $160.20, and the living space for this property is 4,900 between the 14 units. So what they do is they take the average of each square footage for each unit, and it comes out to that 4,900 bucks. So you can tell that these are pretty tiny, right? When we were analyzing these properties here, I'm going to do a screen share of what they look like so you guys have an idea. Let me share this real quick. What is it? Come back. There we go.
Stan,
All right,
so we see that that occupancy that's like 50-some%. So if we see something like that, is that like a sign that like there's value that can be added right there just by making them better and getting it up to 100%?
Absolutely. Right. So now you have a distressed property where the property is empty by almost 50%. So what you can do is you can make it more attractive by, adding value to it and making it look nicer, increase the rents, or, just making it more attractive so that more tenants are wanting to rent out the property, right? You can add vending machines, you can clean the grass up, you can, do exterior painting, like small minor things make big changes in multifamily. Thanks for asking that. Anybody have any questions, or are you guys anything in particular at the moment?
Hey, Stan, can you hear me?
Yep.
So because it's only 50% occupied, you won't be able to qualify for conventional financing of some sort, correct?
It will depend, right? It all depends on the lender, I would say. That's a good question. I can get back to you on that one, but most of the time, as long as when you're, I guess, what I would say is when you evaluate these properties, it'll all be based on what the lenders perceive the value at and what they will loan on that, what I would say.
Hey, Stan.
Yeah.
I did commercial lending for a few years. So in that case, if you have any kind of vacancies, they'll take from the appraisal, the market rents. And so they'll go with the conservative figure. And then that's how
Okay.
you kind of reverse engineer the income if you
So
don't
kinda like
have it. And then some lenders, yeah, if it's more than 50%, then they won't even lend on it. But
Okay. Thanks for
yeah.
that. I appreciate that. Nelson, right there, he answered the question. So is it based more on like a DSCR ratio is what they will lend on?
Exactly.
Perfect. So in regards to that, then most lenders would pretty much lend on sometimes it's a 1.2, right? Or a 1.4 on the DSCR side. I'm not a lender, so obviously if you want to elaborate on it, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, every lender is going to be unique. Some of them are going to try to outbeat somebody else, but typically a golden rule would be like 1.1 or 1.25. Just keep it in that range. And that's like 90% of the lenders that offer DSCR, that's where they're going to be.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So for this property is right here. This is the OM, right? You can see it. They'll give you a quick teaser based on what they think the value of the property should be. This one, I spoke with the wholesaler this morning and they didn't provide any of the actuals on this property. So everything on here is based on a pro forma, right? So there's two separate ways that we underwrite properties. One is the actuals, which is what they're producing in rental income as is. The second is based on a pro forma. Pro forma is basically the future projection of what the property would be after you repair the property and you add, your different amenities, you increase rents, you decrease expense ratios and such. So based on what they are saying, this property, after it's stabilized, they're appraising this. They appraised it or they already have a report valued at 1.34 million, right? But you can see that these are all distressed. It's vacant. They run on separate meters. And based on what this is a pretty big land lot, right? 27,000 square foot of land. And Pono is a specialized, he specializes in land. How long have you been doing it now?
Oh, geez, years, probably about 10 years or so.
Okay, so if you guys have any questions in regards to land, he's the expert for that. I'm not the land expert, so he is. But 27,000 square feet, that's a good amount of space, right? So you can even add value by adding more of these units and build on top of that land to increase the value as well. So that's a few different ways that you can increase, add value to this. So their original purchase price when we underwrote this originally was $785. Okay. And based on the property information that they gave us, this is all the details, gave us the photos of the property. You can see that, these are a little bit outdated of materials, right? You can see just based on what you're looking at that it's not terrible, but it could be better, right? Here's the future performance. So when I underwrote this property, this is based on what their future projection was. And I kind of got as close to as possible with what they were giving me. Most people don't tend to buy, well, there's different ways to buy on an underwriting asset. So you can underwrite the asset based on the actuals, or you can underwrite the property based on pro forma. So for me, when I was taught based on a pro forma basis. So we kind of see what we can do to the property, even if it's underperforming, we can massage the numbers to fit our numbers in order for us to offer based on that data. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So based on all these numbers, they were giving a future value of a 1.36 or 336, and they were running at a 6.8 market cap. Now, this is Houston, and I was talking to the wholesaler this morning and another wholesale team, underwriting team, and they perform anywhere between like a 7 and an 8 cap in Houston. So what does that mean? When you see multifamily, you're gonna see numbers between 4% up to sometimes 13, 15%. So the higher the value and cap rate, the higher the risk, right? When you start stabilizing the property, the lower the numbers, when you start seeing about like 4.5, 6%, that's when you know that the property is starting to be less riskier, and that means it's more stabilized over time. So when you start seeing that, that's where you kind of gauge whether the property is in, the condition that you want it to be. So then it's all case by case, but it's not always the same. So let me go back to the sheet. Okay. So if we go right here, right, their asking price was $785. This offer price, well, let's start here. Let's start at $785. Okay, so if we underwrote this based on what the original asking price is from the wholesaler, right? They're kind of basing their after repair value at 1.34. There's a big difference on the price per unit, right? 14 units, that would be at $56,000 versus a $95,000 per unit at 1.34. The estimated repair costs that they were saying was about 134,000 is what they were estimating. And that's close to about like 2750 per square feet. When you get a property under contract, you're always going to be asked to put down a deposit, earnest money. The typical rule of thumb would be about 1%. Obviously, everything is negotiable. I've seen it as high as 5%, right? But it's really up to you as the investor to figure out which direction you guys want to do. You don't necessarily have to commit to what the broker or the seller, the wholesaler says. It's just more of if there's any other offers that you're competing against, is what I would say. So based on these numbers, right? If you focus right here, the actual numbers, these are what they currently rent at. So 625, $700, and then 525 with the vacancies right here of 6 units. Okay. And if we put it on the pro forma, this is the numbers that they were telling us is 975 for the 1 bed, 1 bath, and then we could increase it to 740 for the studios. So if we look down here at the totals, so per month, you're generating a gross income of 4,475 as is, and 10,830 on a future basis of this property. If you can get the rents up, this is what it would be at. It's going to produce you $53,700 per year as is, and almost $130,000 on an annual basis. Okay, property taxes, give or take, it was about $7,600. Property tax in Texas is pretty high, so that could be a big deal killer. I've underwrote properties in Texas that we thought it was a good deal. Once we found out what the property tax was, it killed the deal completely. So you got to be very wary on which states you guys are going with. The states that we typically target are the ones that have no rent control, the red states that are landlord friendly, ones that obviously you can increase rents over time, and you're not limited to what the state or governing I guess cities tell you that you can or cannot do. So you have to be you have to do your due diligence on that. Insurance is $833, and then everything else in here that are blank is basically tenant, it's being billed to the tenants. So that's another way to also increase your property value. Is, let's say, you have separate gas meters, but you as the landlord are paying for it. You can actually bill it back to the tenants as long as the state allows you to do that. There is some states that restrict you from billing clients or billing tenants certain operating expenses. So you have to look into it. But this one in particular, they were all zero, right? So that's going back into your pocket, as in you don't have to consider that as your expense, your operating expenses. RUBS, when I was asking what RUBS were, RUBS is rent utility bill back system. So that's what you get basically back in credit. Sometimes property management companies, they write that into their profit and loss statements. So just focus on that. So for this in particular, management fees, they typically run you from 8 to 10%. I got this number based on what the pro forma was saying. So I just kind of matched it based on that percentage. But typically when we write management fees, it's typically at 5%. Vacancies are usually at 5%. And then maintenance fees are typically 5%, right? So that's already 20% going into what we call as a war chest, right? You want to put reserves away for times that, you know, AC units go out, you know, you got like a flood happening in the house and things that you need to fix. So you want to put these reserves into a war chest for those rainy days. So if we go right here, typically for an investment property, right? Most lenders would always loan on a 20% loan to value. So it's always going to be around 80-20. Interest rates, we went conservative. When you underwrite properties, we always want to be as conservative as possible. You don't ever want to be in a position where when when it's time to stabilize the property and you want to disposition it out, that you're going to be so tight on the numbers that you can't, there's no cushion for you. So right now, I believe rates might be lower, but we wrote it at 6.5%. Typically, this might be a question for Nelson. Hey, Nelson. Nelson's still there.
Yeah, that's fair. 6.5, 7.5. You're good.
Okay, cool. And then what about loan terms? Do you guys typically write it on a 20 to 30 years, or is it just 20?
Yeah, there's all kinds of variables. You can even go interest only, but they're going to go with the fully amortized payment. So just keep it like that. You're good. That's a good
Okay.
safe zone.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, cool. So if we take all those numbers, right, on the purchase price of $785 with a 20% down, your amount being financed is $628,000 for this property on a 80-20, right? The down payment is going to be $157,000. Closing costs, put about a 2.5%. Sometimes it is 2%, just depending on who your title and escrow company is. If you have a portfolio, they typically give you a discount on it. But for this sake, we'll just go with 2.5%. We don't have any credits on here. And then obviously renovation costs is that $134,000. So the total cash required for this deal, if we put it all together, it's going to cost you at $311,375, right? For this deal, I'm just going to give you guys right here. This is a strategy I learned from another group, which is pretty cool. If we take these numbers right here, the pro forma, the average pro forma number is $773.57, right? Based on the per unit. And then if you take the actuals, it's about averaging for $319.64. And the difference on the average rent increases between that spread is $453.93. From what I learned from them is what they like to do is they like to see at least $100 increase in average rent values for their properties. And with that being said, if you take that average spread, you multiply it by the amount of units in the property, and then you also multiply it by the occupancy by 12 months with the average market cap rate for, let's say, for Houston, it was that 7%. you now increase the value of property by $1 million plus. Okay. Did anyone get lost there?
So you multiply all that together and then you multiply it by the 7%.
So you take your average rental increase of that 453, you multiply it by the number of units, also multiply it by the occupancy rate of 95%, right? If it was fully occupied at 95%, I'm just saying that. By 12 months, and you divide it by the cap rate, the market cap rate for that specific city, because we are using Texas as the city, their average market cap rate is 7% for a C class. This is how much value you can add potentially to this property by just increasing that rent. Now, let's say, for example, we only increase it by $100. Now you've only added $228,000 of added value to that, just from increasing the rents by $100. See how big of a difference that is? So if you add soda machines, if you add laundry mats, if you add a pet fees, right? Wi-Fi fees, like those are small things that you can add to properties that will generate you income and increase the value of it. That's why a lot of people like multifamily, is because of these certain things versus a single family home, which you can't typically do that, right? Once you're locked in on there, you know, most tenants are just going to pay that rent. So with that being said, let's shrink this real quick. Hold on, I gotta move my screen. So if we take a look at here where it's being highlighted, this is based on the current actuals. Okay, here we go. So based on the sales price of $785, at a loan to value of 80%, a down payment of $157, closing costs, your principal for your mortgage, right, at 6.5 interest rate and a term of 30 years, your monthly mortgage is you're paying $3,969 to the bank. Okay. Now, the tenants, they're paying for some of that as well, but you're also putting away and expending a property management company. You're paying your taxes. You have to pay insurance, obviously. And then you're also putting away money for vacancies and some reserve for maintenance. Your total operating expenses come out to $2,237. Now, if you take all those numbers and you minus the operating expenses from your gross rental income, your net operating income is $2,237. That's about 50%, right? And you're generating about $26,852 for the year. But remember, your mortgage payment is $3,900. So in actuality, this property is under, right? This if you bought it at $785, you'd be walking into a property that's not cash flowing at all, right? You'd be at $1,731 of negative cash flow every single month. And if you don't do nothing and you just purchase a property as is, left it, and just said, hey, I'm just going to sit back and relax, you're actually losing money on this property, which is not a good deal, right? Because most investors want a deal to actually cash flow from the start, or more of the experienced ones are going to take on the risk and say, you know what, that's fine with me. I can bleed a little bit just to make sure that I can generate more profits, but it has to make sense. So if we go back to these numbers on the stabilized side, right? If you feel confident as an investor that says, hey, I can take these properties and I can make them cash flow, what is that number going to look like? Now, with this calculator, that's why you always want to underwrite the property before you purchase it, is because you want to know what you can generate on this property, but you can also see what you're going to cash flow based on what you're potentially buying it as, right? You're going to hear the numbers. You're going to hear the terminology like massage the numbers, or let's manipulate the numbers so that it can fit our buy box, right? So I'll show you what I mean by that. So if we keep the purchase price at that 785, we increase the rents, right? And we're basing it on the future value of this property. We left everything the same. Now your monthly income, your cash flow would be about $33,529, right? Annually, you're gonna make around $42,000 if you can. That's if you can get the rents to go up. It's not guaranteed, right? Things come along the way. So with that being said, right, you see all these other metrics in here that I put in, which is your cash and cash, your cap rate, your return of investment, gross rent multiplier, and your DSCR. So these are your metrics that some investors look at. The more experienced ones, they like to focus on other things like IRR and all these other confusing terminologies that we don't need to talk about today because it's just gonna go over your head. So if we take these two columns right here and you look at it, your cash and cash as is negative on your return of investment. Your cap rate is at 3.42. You're generating a negative 13.24% on your ROI. So it's going to take you, this gross rent multiplier, it's going to take you 14.6 years to make your money, your initial investment back, right? That's what the gross rent multiplier is based on the current gross market rent. And then your DSCR loan is well under that 1.2 that Nelson was mentioning. So this wouldn't qualify for most lenders. They'll look at this and they say, you need to have it at that 1.2 DSCR or above. Okay. Based on the pro forma, these look attractive, right? I have an investor that's looking at this and says, hey, as long as the cash and cash on a pro forma can fit anywhere between a 10 and 15%, we like those properties. So they're interested in this just because this is a negative asset from the start, but they see it as, hey, this is a value add for us and we can turn this around. This for them, they'll take it all day, right? Other people, they don't want to do that. They don't want to take on that risk because that means they're going to have to get more equity from private lenders from the start. But if you have the capital from the beginning and you can take that hit, then by all means, take it on. So this is, I'm going to go back to this. So what does that mean, right? When it comes to the numbers at 785. So let's say, because this number is obviously already at 13.60, let's play with the numbers to make sure that if we bought this at a lower price, we can generate a little bit better of a cash and cash on the actual. So let's say, we don't want to purchase it at 785. And say, hey, I want to buy this property at 650,000, right? So at 650,000 purchase price, this all changes, but not a lot, because the actuals still are negatively performing, right? It's at a negative 4.8 versus that 6.67. So we saved ourselves a little bit of money on the purchase price, but because the actuals are so terrible, it's not a good deal for other investors that want cash flow from the start. But with the pro forma, look how much it increased. It's almost at an 18% cash and cash. That's like a 5% difference for some investors just from changing the purchase price. So that's how we kind of go in to certain properties and how we underwrite it so that it makes sense for us that says, hey, 785 won't work for us, but maybe 650 will, right? Because we have to take in factor of a rehab that we have to put in for about 134,000. So that does skew the numbers. So if we didn't have to go in there and we didn't have to repair it, let's say it was 0, right? And we wanted to buy it at the full price of 785. Now the numbers change also. Cash on cash went up to 24%. But look at the cash and cash for the actuals. Okay.
Is cash on cash the same as IRR?
I believe it's like slightly different because IRR is based on the value, the weighted value of time. based on your return. Cash and cash is just what your purchase price divided by the total cash required to get into the property, right? It's like basically your total investment on that. So it's a little bit of a difference. I'm putting together a formula that does it. It's right here, but I haven't attached it. But it's basically what you would get over time if you're getting paid, you know, your monthly payouts and your when you're planning on cashing out based on what the value is over when you stabilize it. So that makes a big difference when it comes to your offer price versus what you're asking for. So that's it for now. Do you guys have any questions or things that of concern that you guys want me to clarify on?
So how would I be able to calculate this formula? Like, is there like a formula like on on your notes that I can actually use a calculator and actually do these calculations?
Yeah, it's right here. So these are the three that I mentioned. I don't know if you were, oh, you were here. So these are
Yeah,
the
I
three
was
main, yeah, these are the three main ones. NOI divided by cap rate equals purchase price multiplied by cap rate equals your NOI. And NOI divided by purchase price equal your cap rate. Those are the three main ones if you just really want to do a quick and dirty back of the napkin type of calculation. Now, if you want to see what your debt service cover ratio is, you take your NOI, you can divide it by your debt service. And then if you want to know what your debt service is, you take your annual NOI, divide that by your annual principal and interest. That's when you get your debt service. So a lot of lenders will use debt service coverage ratio based on the assets performance, right? You don't necessarily have to have it filled, or it doesn't have to necessarily be of like performing at the moment, but you'll base it off of what it can perform at based on the, you know, your principal and interest and then your actual NOI. And this was the formula right here for that other one that I said below, which was if you take your average rent increases, you multiply it by the number of units, multiply it by the occupancy rate, multiplied by 12 months because it's 12 months for the year. And you divide it, actually it's divided by your cap rate. That's what will equal your added value to your property. Remember, cap rates are decimal, right? It looks like this. If you're doing it on a calculator, it's 0.0747%, 0.0545%. Okay, that's how you do it.
Gotcha, thanks.
You're welcome.
Is that template available for us to use?
No, unfortunately, I don't give this out. If you guys want to do, I always incentivize you guys. If you guys want to send me any leads and you feel like this might be a good deal, I always will let you know that this I can gift to you, but I don't give this out just because we put a lot of time in putting this out. I can give you something like the basic for this, but this is just more of like a back of the napkin type of thing. I can give this type of formulas over. But if you ever have any questions and you want me to underwrite a deal for you, my number is on my screen underneath my face. And just shoot me a text like, hey, Stan, met you through the underwriting class. I got a deal. Do you mind us underwriting it together? But make sure before you send me anything, you get most of these. If you can get the rent rolls and the profit and loss statements, those are the two main ones that were really would help out. You don't necessarily have to have an offer memorandum, and sometimes you can't get a T12. So these are the main two right here. If you can provide this before we underwrite it, that way it can help us get through the process a lot quicker. That would be very, very helpful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Anyone else?
what's the P&L statement
the profit and loss statements.
Oh,
So
okay,
basically,
gotcha.
yeah, it's just gonna show you all the income and expenses. Here, let me see if I can show you guys an example of one that was provided to me. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna show you guys this. So you guys just have an idea. Everyone's gonna have something different. So here is a copy of the rent rolls of a different property, right? You can see here, let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay. As you can see right here, the rent rolls, right? It'll tell you what unit number, their name, the square footage, market rents, the current rent rates, any vacancies, any miscellaneous charges. Like this is a little bit more in depth. Most people won't even have this type of information. It's usually just the rental rate, when they're delinquent, and who's not paying, right? So this is just an example of what the analysis is for rent rolls. And then it'll tally up what's the bottom, who's paying, who's not, who's vacant, which ones are occupied and stuff. Here is what it looks like for a T12. You see how it says income, expenses, and then it just goes, it has a breakdown of each month and it totals everything. So we literally just take all this information, all the expenses, and we plug it in, right? It does it for, some people will generate it for us. So all we're looking at is just want to verify that all of it has been correct. A lot of times you always want to double check because sometimes these brokers, they do fluff the numbers and they're not always correct. I've caught some that, you know, their formulas were broken and I had to do it myself. And then when I did it, they were a few, you know, a couple grand off, and that couple grand can cost you, you know, a good deal, especially if you're not paying attention to it. So, you know, you always want to get those main files before sending us anything. Cool. We got about 6 minutes left, so feel free to answer or ask me any more questions that you guys might have. If you guys want, save my number. It's right here on the bottom of the screen. Feel free to message me, bother me anytime. I do these underwriting classes with Josh and Carlos and Sam. Sam's always in here every Friday at 3 p.m. But during the week, I'm always underwriting deals. Not just multifamily, but I also underwrite single family homes. Whenever Carlos usually has a creative deal, he always asks me to do it and help him structure it out. And then we kind of plug it into the calculator and it'll give us a feedback of what, you know, we should make an offer at. But remember, every time you underwrite something, you always want to figure it out, because that's, you always make your purchase or your buy, right? You'll hear this verbiage a lot where you make the money before you buy on a property, meaning once you underwrite it on the sell side, you don't make money on the sell side. You're making it initially on the buy side of the, you know, based on what the numbers look like.
Awesome. Thank you, Stan.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, hey Stan, quick question. Because
Yep.
it came from a wholesaler, does that mean that, do you have to close through like a traditional loan, or can you get really creative with the financing? Like one of the questions, like, would they be able to hold paper until you can stabilize the property and then refinance it out and then pay them then?
Oh, that's a good question. So you're talking about if a wholesaler has the note?
Uh-huh.
Well, typically, if a wholesaler's job is always just to pass the contract over to the new end buyer. So they
Correct.
don't typically would want to hold any notes, right? That's a whole. I don't think any wholesalers would want to hold a note.
So getting creative financing with the owner would be a challenge.
Not necessarily. You can structure it so that.
They get their fee.
Right, exactly. So let's say here, I'm gonna bring it back real quick because this is a good question.
Yeah, that's what I would say is I would try to talk to the wholesaler and see if you can get in contact with the seller and let the wholesaler know that, yeah, you'll still get your, your assignment fee or, finder's fee, whatever.
Yeah, you can underwrite it so that it's a seller finance wholesale deal, right? So let's say, for instance, right, me as a wholesaler, if I pick this up at 650, right, and I want to wholesale this to you, Pono,
Yep.
all I do is I put it under contract for 650. If the numbers look good, right, based on these numbers at 17.99%, and you buy it based on a pro forma basis, I lock this in at 650. I want to wholesale it to you. And let's say if I wholesale it to you for, I don't know, 20 grand. All I do is I add on 20 grand to this offer price. Oops, add another zero. Now, if I look down here, look at 17.28. So that $20,000 still would make sense for the end buyer, right? It would still make sense for you to purchase it at the 670. You got to keep in mind, even wholesalers, you can actually lose a deal, or the deal would actually be lost if the wholesaler adds on a big, large fee. That's what happened to a big portfolio that was underwriting, like 54 million. They were trying to add on like $5,000 per door, and it just killed the deal completely.
You just got greedy.
So yeah, people get greedy sometimes, right? I mean, you gotta make sense, because a lot of the times most wholesalers don't know how to underwrite. But that's just basically how we would do it. You just basically add on your fee on top, and as long as it still makes sense, like even for this, let's say I locked it in at 650, but then I want to sell it to somebody else for 750, and they want to buy it at 10% cash and cash on the pro forma. Look at how much room it still has. It's still at 14%, right? So technically I could make $100,000 on this deal, and there are some wholesalers that do. Right? This could still even work at the 785, I believe, if we ran the numbers, the 13.6. So that's what we talk about, massaging the numbers. If you can wholesale it, if you can lock it in for a really good deal, as long as it makes sense for the end buyer, this is still a deal or not. It just depends.
Okay.
Yeah, but wholesalers won't typically, I mean, they'll hold the contract, they won't hold the note. But you can structure it as a seller finance, because all you're doing is massaging these numbers, right? So let's say we get on a seller finance, they want a seller finance on the 10%, they say 3% interest rate, they'll hold it for 40 years, right? That's all you're really doing. Everything else stays the same. You're just playing with the numbers on this side. All right, now look at your cash and cash. It just went to 25%, but you were able to offer more or at price because of those terms. So the wholesaler can still wholesale a seller finance deal to somebody else. It's just a matter of if that wholesaler is able to negotiate with the seller in regards to what terms that they want. So
Okay.
yeah, we can talk about it whenever you want.
Yeah, because the seller doesn't know your wholesale fee, and the buyer doesn't, only you do. So, I kind of do that too, to where I'll be looking at a deal and will structure my wholesale fee around the deal. To where, like I can take a bigger hit if it's going to mean that it's going to work for an end buyer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Do most wholesalers have that type of relationship with the seller that they could say, hey, we're not going to give you cash up front, give us 2 years. They'll make payments to you, let's say interest only of some sort. That way I have the ability to get all the units up to par. I could stabilize the property, I could refinance them out, and then I could pay them off. Do most wholesalers have that type of relationship, or not so much?
Most wholesalers
won't.
Okay.
most wholesalers don't even know how to do creative finance. So all they want to do is just make their money and bounce.
Right.
Right. So you just got to assume that you need to get the wholesaler out of the way and just pay their fee and get them out of the picture as soon as possible. But there are times where I've had a conversation where if the wholesalers, or let's say an agent, is involved, you can always add the fee on the purchase price as usual on the backside, and pay them off that way. and that's like pretty common. As long as it, I think Pace has done it where he made them a partner, or he had escrow break the payments out over months, and it didn't have to be a lump sum. So it's just more of how creative you can get.
Because you could always pay your wholesaler fee with your lender.
I don't know about that.
No,
Private lender, yes, but not a actual commercial lender.
not commercial lender, yeah, okay.
And then on
Yeah.
top of that, I think you would have an issue, like I believe Nelson was saying, is that to get this financed through a bank, because it's not even 50% occupied, it'd be challenging.
Right, so you would have to be based on that DSCR loan, and some lenders will only base it off of the actuals and not the pro forma. So, yeah. All
Cool,
right,
thank
well,
you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate your guys' time. And so went a little bit over 4 o'clock, but if you guys want to join me on the next week, Friday, we'll do another analysis. Maybe we can do something live. If someone has a deal that they want to bring in person during the live, we can, we can do a pre-underwriting, so we know what we're going to be writing, and then we can see if that deal works or not. Cool.
Thanks for your time, Stan.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, guys.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend,
You
guys.
too.
Later.